to put things in perspective, what are the benefits to business leaders of doing interviews?
Well, if you're a business leader, ultimately you need to have a brand that runs alongside your business. And as Warren Buffett has said, that your ability to speak is probably about 50% plus 50% towards how much money you're going to make in your lifetime, because you will be prominent, you will be regarded, you will be respected, you will be held accountable, but also it's instant marketing. And so when you look at the money that's in the advertising world of agencies all over the place putting a spin on what it is that you do and your company does and all the marketing, there's nothing more effective than being there on the hot seat, people asking you questions, and you position yourself as an industry expert. And I work with people all the time, all around the world, to position them as industry icons. Now, why is that important? Because celebrity is something, being an influencer is something that's kind of been done to death. You know, if you're gorgeous and you're funny and you're very good at going to places that make you look really picturesque, then you can be an influencer, because people's eyeballs will follow what it is that you do, especially on Instagram, but now on TikTok as well. But I don't think that that's the angle. I think that's got a shelf life. I think the key to it is, if you are brilliant at what you do, then you need to be able to tell people how brilliant you are at what you do. Now, why is this important? Well, it means you don't burn as brightly as your normal influencer or celebrity. But what it also means is you're not held accountable for your personal life or even your personal views in the same way as your ability to do what you do brilliantly, which is deliver content, deliver services, create stuff that people would want. And so being interviewed and having your words and your voice and your ideas go out means that people identify with your mindset, and they learn to trust you. And if they learn to trust you, then they want to buy from you. And so you sell the certainty that if somebody's going to like you, they trust your business, and they trust your business savvy to deliver what they wanted from you. And that's why they connect.
Can you give us some examples of the kind of interviews that you do, both as a host and a guest?
Yeah, it really varies, because I do a lot of stuff that's I don't do so much online as I was during the pandemic, because I tend to be out and about doing stuff more than anything. I do a lot of stuff on stages. So, for instance, when I'm hosting big events, I'll do interviews with a panel or one-to-ones with individuals who are brilliant at what they do. And my background is being I'm an ex-BBC journalist. So my job is not to know a lot of different subjects. My job is to know how to get the best out of the subject in front of me, the person, and be able to ask leading questions that give them the answers that they should ultimately be able to share with the audience. Because the thing is, even the interview that you're doing with me now, and any part of business, your relationship with your partners, with your wife, your children, your friends, you've got to ask one question: what's in it for them? If you think about what's in it for them, then you'll give them what they want, and that will make them happy. So for anybody who's married and thinking, why do we get on? Have you asked your partner what they want and just delivered that? Then they're happy, which means that you become happy. So ultimately, when you're interviewing somebody, what you've got to do is, you're not interviewing that person to make them happy. It's not up to them. You're interviewing it to give something to the audience, because if the audience doesn't perceive the value that they get from this interaction, we've got lots of other options, like pressing click or going to Netflix or looking on YouTube or anything else. So what you've got to do is basically, and my BBC training was about this, you stay neutral, you hold up a mirror effectively with your questions to the person in front of you, and it's their job to share with your audience what it is that they need to know from the questions. And if they avoid it, and they don't answer the questions effectively, then you've got to respond with deeper questions, more probing questions, or sometimes you walk away and you just leave them on that. Because if somebody tells you a lie to a question where we know the answer, and you challenge them and they still stick with it, then what do you want to do? Do you want to fall out with them, or do you let the viewer at home work out for themselves what's going on? So I try and make sure that I've got a good rapport with the person in front of me. I don't want to humiliate them. I give them full respect, whoever they are, but I'm very aware that our job is to get information to the viewer or the listener, so they come away with something that they can use to make their life or their business better than it was before they started paying attention to what we're talking about.
So then are you most often the guest or the host?
Most of the time, let's see, I'm not really sure, to be honest with you. It all kind of blurs. Maybe I'm just getting old, but I get interviewed quite a lot about my expertise on branding, speaking, and just, how to do motivation and so on, because I've been a motivational speaker for 20 plus years. But I do interview people quite a lot, but that tends to be on stages. So for instance, if I'm hosting an event, what's typical is you'll get the audience at a fever pitch, you bring on the guest speaker, they do their thing, but before they leave, if there's time, you get to ask a couple of questions to the speaker, or you let the audience do it. Now, 99% of the time, the audience don't do anything. The audience, when they're really excited and they love it, they just go, and that's a good audience, because a bad audience will leave. But it means that you've got somebody there who wants to answer more questions. So sometimes, if they've got time, sometimes I'll ask them questions, but sometimes I'll wait and see what the reaction is. And if it looks like it's a done deal, then I'll let them go from the stage and take over myself. So it really depends. I do interview usually people in the corporate space. I don't do a lot of celebrities the way I used to. When I was on the radio, on TV, it was all about getting eyeballs on big stars. So guys like Bruce Willis and let's see, James Brown, and a ton of people I've worked on stage with, and some of them interviewed, especially from the corporate world, like Jack Canfield and Brian Tracy and some really well-known sort of business leaders. I've had the pleasure of talking to them on my own TV show. In fact, many of them I did about 15 years ago, before anybody was doing these kind of interviews. And I would lug it. I would come along my camcorder, which was probably about the same size as a coffee cup. You remember those things when people didn't have phones. So I'd bring along this and have a tripod, and I was the only person who was there to interview. Nobody had camera phones. So I'd set it up and I'd wait patiently, and I'd get the interview with a big star, because they all came to Dubai, and then I'd be able to use it on, I'm not even sure if we had YouTube then, or Facebook. I think I put it on Facebook because it just started. But certainly, nobody was there to queue up to do interviews, because how could they? Nobody wants to carry a big bag with a camcorder in and a tripod. So that's how I started doing them there. But I think what we've got now is a wonderful situation where anybody can do citizens broadcasting. You can be a broadcasting house from your own home, from your own office, from the street, doesn't matter, just from your phone. And that makes it a wonderful opportunity for anybody to create a podcast. And it's not necessary for you to have a huge following or a huge audience. Not everybody is going to be Joe Rogan. And sometimes it's better that you're not. Sometimes it's better that you just talk from the heart to an audience that wants to know about a certain subject. So everybody should have a podcast to support their business. And if they want to show their expertise, interview all the people that work with you, not your staff, but the suppliers, the experts in the industry. And what happens is it raises the game of your business and the credibility that you have. People then say, wow, I really love your podcast because I love your stuff. I want to buy from you because you're the expert. So I think it's massively useful for people to do that. In terms of the interviews I do with everybody, it's really about working out what's best for the audience. And I don't love everybody I interview. Sometimes I can't wait for them to leave stage. I've got to be honest. But most of them are interesting.
You mentioned James Brown and Jack Canfield. I think they probably represent two ends of the spectrum there.
Well, yeah, because I used to work on radio. When I stopped working on radio, I worked on a commercial radio station. So when anybody came to Dubai who was a big star, then I would usually go on stage and do the introduction to the audience, and then I bring them on stage. And so I was a warm-up act for all these guys. And sometimes I was blessed enough to do interviews with them directly. So, for instance, I got to open up Planet Hollywood in Dubai. So I was working with Bruce Willis, Sylvester Stallone, Amitabh Bachchan, who's a huge godfather of Hindi radio, of Hindi TV, Cindy Crawford, Wesley Snipes, and Patrick Swayze. Not a bad lineup. I mean, that's going back a few years. I didn't have the grey hair in place then, but that was typical for the work I was doing. So I worked on stage with Enrique Iglesias and the Spice Girls, UB40, Robert Plant, Sting. Goodness knows, I'm a very old person.
Do you ever get nervous interviewing people like that?
Sometimes you do, and it really depends on whether they're good to play with or not. because some people are really great. You get a rapport with them and they're really easy to deal with. Some people aren't. So, for instance, I haven't interviewed him, but I've seen him interviewed Robert De Niro. Hard not to crack. He's a grumpy old person. And so he wants to say what he wants to say, doesn't want to mess about. Harrison Ford, Al Pacino, some of the great heroes are like that. But then again, you got a guy like Tom Hanks, who's lovely to talk to. So what I try and do is pre-talk with them first. I interviewed Stan Lee, from Marvel many years ago, when his movies were first starting to get onto the cinemas. And I think that what you do is you do your preparation. As long as you've got that, then it's much easier. But at the end of the day, even the Queen goes to the bathroom, hopefully not in an interview. So everybody's human. And if they want to act like a jerk, then the audience will see that they're acting like a jerk. You are the eyes and ears of your audience. So for what I do, like say a live event that gets streamed live, I've got about 7 or 8 different audiences I've got to deal with. So I've got the voices in my head that are saying, right, Dave, what are you going to do next? I've got the person in front of me who I've got to interview and talk to. I've got the audience in the studio or in front of us who are live, who are watching everything. So I've got to talk to them as well. I've got the showrunner or the stage manager who's walking around, keeping an eye on everything and keeping an eye on the time and keeping an eye on the lights and the sound and so on. I've also got the sponsors. I've got to keep them happy because ultimately, if I don't do the job that they paid for, they won't want to sponsor the event again and they won't want to bring me back as the reason for it being successful. Then if you're streaming live, you got an audience at home, and the audience at home are also watching the audience. They get the vibe of the studio audience. So the studio audience or the live audience are cheering. At home, you feel the cheer. If they're booing, at home you feel the boo. It's like you catch the Wi-Fi code of everybody. Then you've got to think about, as a speaker or a host, you have to think about your optics, which is if you do an event, you've also got to think about the footage. You get your next event because you've just done the previous one, so you need to have some good sound bites and some good visuals. So that's about 7 or 8 different things you're going on at the same time as asking a question to the person in front of you. It can be quite difficult to juggle. I don't get nervous. I just embrace it. And to be honest with you, here's what I do. I don't care. If it goes wrong, I've been around for a long time, so I know I'm not going to mess it up. I'm going to do the best job I can do, but I'm happy to look stupid. I'm happy to get it wrong, but I'll always make sure that the audience gets the most out of it. I've been on stage at Dubai Rugby Sevens with 50,000 people in the audience, and we had a power cut, and all the electrics went off, and you got live sport, the floodlights were working, microphone's not working, but the screen was. So during my break, I told the guys, can you put on onto the big board Wonderwall by Oasis? It's a famous song, a British song for the audience. So they put it up, and I walked out in the middle of the field and started conducting the singing with my hands. And the whole audience sung the song a cappella. And we did that many years with Bohemian Rhapsody and so on. I mean, I'm a stage hypnotist as well. And I went out on an event in South Africa where we had a complete power cut. I was halfway through a show, great show, people doing crazy stuff on stage, and then the lights go off. And I'm looking at the guys in the wings going, right, what do we do? They're going, leave it. And we're trying to make phone calls, but everything else is pitch dark. Full crowd. My first night, it was probably about 2/3 were media. I've got 10 people on stage in the dark who'll do anything I tell them to, but my responsibility is to keep them safe. So I waited about 10 minutes for the guys to say the lights are coming back on. They didn't come back on. And I'm thinking, are people thinking that this is part of a show? Because it's not funny now, and they still need something out of it. So then I thought, I'm in a theatre. The microphone's not working, but I'm in a theatre. Theatres, when they have a play, not everybody's walking around the microphone, so the acoustics must be quite good. So I said to the audience, can you still hear me talking? They said, yes. I said, great. Everyone take a big deep breath and close your eyes. And I hypnotized the entire audience. And I took them on a trip to find success in the future, pacing their job and their relationships and luck and all the different things that were involved in their future. I did it for about half an hour. During that half an hour, the lights didn't come back on. So after about half an hour, I'm done. I want to go home. So I said to them, right, what we're going to do is I'm going to count from 1 to 10, and everybody's going to come out of their hypnosis, and they're going to light up their phone cameras to illuminate the room, give yourselves a massive round of applause, and make your way out. So I counted from 1 to 10. On the count of 10, all the lights went up in the room as all the phones went on. Massive round of applause, waking up everybody. Everyone's happy. They start making their way out towards the exits. As soon as they opened the doors, the lights came in. Not inside the theatre, but outside. Why? Because apparently, I only got told later on, in South Africa, certainly Johannesburg, they have a lot of power cuts. And they've got generators. And where I was at Caesar's Palace, which is this huge resort of gaming, they've got generators, but only for the gaming, because they generate money there. As far as they're concerned, theatres, restaurants, we don't make the money. That's just the punters who make their money. And so everything else was going apart from Muggins in his theatre. And so the power came back to the theatre 4 hours later. Did I panic? A little bit. But at the end of the day, there's only so much you can do. And when you look back at it, it gives you a smile. And I'm happy with that.